it's interesting when artists get together because then you get some conversations that we might not otherwise have. So this is the first in the little series we're doing with artists who are from in this show. And we have Pagk and DG Krueger, and Lynn Umlauf is on her way. And Chris Giannakos is going to be on another panel coming up next month. And Chris is in the show, of course. So when we were first sitting together tonight, you were asking each other if you liked your work. And I
asked
thought
Paul if you enjoyed his work.
Enjoyed his work, and I thought that was a great question, because maybe some artists don't even think about enjoying their work, but enjoying the process of making their work. So what do you think of that?
I asked the question in response to Paul expressing nervousness about speaking, because I got the advice today to convey the enjoyment I feel in my work. This body of work is probably the most joyful I've ever done. I relish every minute I'm working on this work, and have from the very beginning. And that helps center me. Although I was advised that late in the day, it helps center me in a place to present what I've written.
Which is your work here?
This piece here.
Oh, I see, okay. Then Paul is somewhere.
There, behind.
Right, okay.
But as you were saying before, there's a profound reason for your enjoyment in your work.
This body of work that I started a few years ago and continue uses personal photographs from the 32 years I've been together with my partner.
And so it's somewhat autobiographical, would you say?
I would say it's presented too piecemeal to be autobiographical, but it undoubtedly is, because it is our personal photographs from 30 years.
I just have this question. How do you feel showing to the world your personal life so openly?
I feel very good about it. That said, after the opening of the exhibit upstate that I'm in right now, a two-person exhibit, I was devastated after that opening. I wasn't aware of expectations I had, but there was a lack of response that was baffling to me. In retrospect and subsequently, as I always do, speculate on the reasons why people behave as they do. And it led to a lot of good thought and information. But the intensity of exposing myself and the questions I asked about what have I exposed psychologically about myself with this work? Or what have I sublimated into this work that I refuse to deal with in my real life? All these questions were extremely painful. Whether they became answered or unanswered, it was a week of being pretty thoroughly torn apart and wondering what the hell I was doing. But it all was a result of, I guess, some expectations that I had for that opening, which I actually was unaware of. I was unaware of to be celebrated or complimented or anything. But what I've written here says much more about how I feel about presenting it to the world. But I'm glad you asked that. It's nice to answer it off the cuff. Hi, Lynn. I'm Dave.
Hi.
Hi again.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Yeah.
Hi, Lynn.
Hey, Hal.
Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
So we're joined by Lynn Umlauf, whose work is right here, the blue and yellow. And you know Paul's work, Lynn, just above John Willenbecker and to the left of Chris Giannakos in the white frame. And
Yes.
And Dave's work is right above him there.
Fantastic. Okay.
So we were playing with the question that Paul was about to speak to. Do you enjoy your work?
Your answer was interesting when I asked you.
Yeah, I've always had a very big, I kind of always had a problem with that question. Not because it's wrong or right, it's just as a, enjoyment is something that I never really thought of. I never thought, do I enjoy painting? Yes, of course I enjoy painting, but that's not the reason why I paint. I, as a child, loved going to museums, but I think, which is kind of a fuss because most children didn't like going. Most children don't like going to museums, I think. So I suppose deep down in me, I felt, do I enjoy being myself? Because I think painting and drawing is part of myself. I've been so embedded in it. Do I enjoy being who I am? It's a bit kind of difficult questions to answer for me. I can say during the painting process, when the painting arrives at a place, I think I may have resolved an issue in my painting, or the painting gets somewhere that may be magical. Then I get some kind of titillation. Yeah, wait a minute. The painting has got to a place that I didn't expect it to get to. So maybe there I can say, if that equals enjoyment, yes.
Absolutely, yeah.
But otherwise, the process itself, I mean, I'm very hands-on as a painter. So if I didn't enjoy what I was doing, I don't think I'd be doing it. But I didn't ask that question.
Could I just ask another question that would relate to that? Which would be like, just more specifically, like when you both seem to work with your hands when you make your art, more on photography based?
Yes, despite being strictly digital.
Okay, so then I was just asking that question to follow up with the question he's asking about enjoyment or during the creative process, or during the act of making something. Is that like when you're, maybe for both of you, when you're actually drawing or painting or using your hands to create the work, is sometimes is it like a real frustration, to get through this process? Or is it something that you kind of more tend to lose yourself in? And if you find processes that take you out of that, like say, a way of making a mark that takes you out of the process of like making, do you then abandon that kind of thing and go into areas that, by then, I mean, that would be a sense of enjoyment, something you enjoy doing, rather than, yes.
I think that there's no way to abandon something once you start a sculpture or a painting. It's actually, it pulls you through it. There's no way you can abandon it. It's like if you say, well, I've got this vision and it's up here and it can't be born. How do you do that? You can't do that.
So there's a real sense of responsibility.
Oh,
to
absolutely.
go through.
Absolutely. It's like if you feel that futile, you might as well quit. I mean, the question, of course, it doesn't enter. It's like the enjoyment. You can't go to another place. It isn't anymore.
So the enjoyment is not as Paul was saying, part of that. No.
I didn't know if I enjoy looking at the river from my window, and I enjoy watching the boats go down, and I enjoyed the snow coming down the other night. I even enjoyed the vision of Sandy, even if it was horrible, because it reminded me of Tarkovsky. And there's some things that one visually can enjoy. I enjoy going to museums because it gives me immense joy. I enjoy looking at great art. I enjoy looking at performance. I enjoy looking at films because it helps my mind work in no different way than just I suppose
Takes you out of what you're used to.
Well, I think I remember when I was in my early 20s, there was a Japanese girlfriend of a friend of mine, and she said, her whole life was an art form. When she brushed the floor, she did it as an art form.
Yeah.
So everything she did it with great intention.
Right.
So I suppose maybe she enjoyed everything. Or did she enjoy nothing?
But then when you're painting, is that kind of total engagement that she was talking about, that she called enjoyment?
If it's about semantics,
No. Well,
if it was enjoyment as semantics,
yeah. Until they're
I think-
defined, yeah.
I think depending how you define enjoyment,
Right.
it most likely, yes, I enjoy painting, but
Yeah.
it wouldn't be like, I think a child most likely enjoys drawing. It gives them immense pleasure to draw.
Yeah.
Maybe painting as a child, when you grow up, one maybe looks for that same immense pleasure that one got when one was a child,
Yeah.
completely free of every possible thought process apart from the act of making a mark.
Right.
But I think it's kind of, I don't think you can ever get there as a person, I mean, as an adult.
Right.
I would offer a response to your question in that I'm an untrained artist, never schooled, and I've always, my method of working has always been finding an idea I want to express and keeping it in mind until the media or medium or a way of assembling that idea physically into an object or image comes forth.
Yeah.
One example would be a body of work that I wanted to express a sense of saturation with pollution, or the omnipresence of HIV. And the way I ended up expressing it was photographing myself as silhouettes, very murky silhouettes in negatives, so I was a black figure on a blank ground, and sandwiching these slides in between layers of colored stained glass that had bubbles in it. And this created exactly the murky environments with not just myself, objects and scenes in that body of work. And another was I tired of imagery to a point where I wanted to obliterate imagery as a practice. And I painted photographs white and black, and at a point I dipped them in some plaster that was in my studio to obliterate the image. And then I gave the images some shape with some stainless steel bands to give it form. And at a point, this was when speculation in the art market was a big, it was birthing. And I thought that a chocolate coating on these plaster-covered images that you're not even guaranteed that what you're told is in there. It was perfect. And that was the jumping off point for something I had always wanted to do. That was the first body of work that I did about my lover. They were homemade chocolate-covered sex Polaroids. This is an example of, I could have perhaps drawn our sex life or something, but this was how that gestated and became work.
Right.
With no training as an artist.
Lynn, do you think your work has any element of your life in it autobiographically in the way that Dave's describing?
Yeah, because it's mostly abstract.
But
I can't. It would be hard to use it an example of any autobiographical detail. It just doesn't function that way.
but maybe on a different plane, emotionally or psychologically, the
On the way
abstraction.
of, in the way of putting it together, the expression, there is an expression as it comes out. In the way of putting it together, that is probably rougher and more brighter contrast, and when I say rougher, I mean cruder. The way of putting it together, it just. Also, I seem to be losing patience about things taking so long, and I'm trying to work on something, so I really hammer it to make it happen. You know? You can't get it right. I'm talking to the work. And so in that sense, I get a lot of the involvement with the work, and that shows up in it. It's bound to. You know? It's like bumps and lumps and bruises that I think you can see it in the work.
Is that impatience a reflection of a more concrete idea of what you want to produce, or more tightening of adhering to something that's...
Thanks for asking. Yeah. If I wanted the rigor of what I'm thinking to show up in the work, if it doesn't, it's really it's hard. It's really makes you feel bad. So that happens.
And I see where it shows.
Yeah.
In the elements you put in your work, use lots of various elements. How do they appear in the making? Like there's a lot of transparent elements, there's light, there's opaque elements. There seem to be found elements, non-found elements. How do they appear? How do they get? I mean, you seem to be somebody who, as I've seen, is a person who makes work in the making. So how does an element appear in it? How does that element get attached? When does it get attached? Do you just see something and say, oh, this will work well for this sculpture, or do you think, oh, I need this element and put it with it?
I think, yeah, I work very intuitively, and I have a lot of materials in my studio that I've kept for maybe 30 years. So sometimes, like one that I have was the cornices of the corners of a building that I found on the street. It just covers between the roof and the wall. It's that kind of edge that you see. It runs all along a tin roof. First you have the roof, but then you have to come down the walls. So that's what that edging, I still have it. I just used it in the last sculpture I did over at Tribeca Gallery. And that was, it got a little rusty. I had to take some navel jelly and move all the rust around and get it out. But that siding, to use it, to grab it, I knew that that's what I had to have. You just know because you got it, and you inventory the things you have because you knew somewhere it was going to be useful, and that's where you grab it from. It's a good question. I don't know how it happens, but I did pull that out of my head.
So, in a certain way, wouldn't you feel that these elements that have been in your studio for so long gain part of you and they become part of you?
Yeah.
And they are autobiographical in the way that you live with them and then they become part of your sculpture?
Yeah.
Because they've been with you for 30 years?
Yeah.
So each sculpture is actually a representation of yourself in an indirect way?
Yeah.
Or your studio life?
And even transforming it into that thing that it was, into the sculpture, is a way of making a personal detail out of it. Bending it, cutting it, blocking it so that it can actually follow the lines of the sculpture. And then painting it. Somewhere in my mind that came about, and so I had to follow it.
I mean, I often think of making art is, when I paint something, I always have this feeling that sometimes the painting itself has more demands than I give it, or let's say it sometimes leads the way. Do you feel that your sculptures lead you the way, and then you kind of retain it again, and then it kind of demands things of you that you have to kind of follow through?
Yeah. I'm always trying to listen and I have to see it.